When I was little, we had a black and white television to watch. I remember being very curious about it and the moving pictures that were inside. There was only CBC in English and French, and CTV with Popcorn Playhouse. That was on Saturdays. Every year, CBC would have Christmas shows that quickly became family favorites. First was Charlie Brown Christmas, which came out in 1965, with Linus and that sad looking tree transformed into something beautiful by friendship, cooperation, and inspiration. Then there was the Grinch, who tried to sabotage Christmas by taking all the gifts and food out of Christmas until his heart grew by 3 sizes. It feels like we have a new kind of Grinch trying to steal our Christmas from us, but we're not sure what the Grinch looks like this year. Is the Grinch a round ball with lots of spikes sticking out of it? Or a politician changing their message? Or a doctor who gives us scary numbers? Or someone who wants to just dismiss this as a conspiracy? Unlike the Grinch who stole all the toys and decorations, this Grinch has allowed us to keep the ribbons and bows and everything that comes from a store, but took away our ability to stand hand in hand, singing our old carols and songs. Wahoo, wahoo. Nevertheless, we still gather to hear an ancient story that has given people courage and inspiration, not just for 55 years like Charlie Brown and the Grinch, but for thousands of years. Some years, our ancestors in the faith gathered in catacombs under the city of Rome in secret. Some years, our ancestors gathered in Jerusalem, rebuilding it after it was destroyed by the Roman army. Some years, they gathered in hospitals they had founded so poor people could get health care. Some years, they gathered on mission boats traveling the coastlines of Canada with good news, health care, education, books, and more to BC and Newfoundland. Some years, they gathered on battlefields for a night of soccer with their enemies, or in bombed out churches to sing Silent Night in many languages. They gathered in different places and different ways to hear this story. This is a challenging story of people being forced to be counted for the sake of Caesar's taxes, showing the power that the Roman Empire had over poor peasants. Government-sanctioned bullying and injustice dominated the Mediterranean at this time, where people lacked the basic freedoms and rights, but nevertheless, they hoped. The people of Israel hoped that one day there would be justice for all and freedom despite all the evidence to the contrary. They clung to their stories and sacred writings that said that they were not alone. They were part of a community guided and shaped by God. They hoped because they could do no other than hope. This story is of families uprooted, separated from their loved ones, forced to travel where and when they didn't want to go. One young couple, alone, isolated because of government orders, the wife heavily pregnant, and far from her family and community, but also far from the rumors and gossip that talked about her behind her back, about how her husband was not the father of her child. And the husband, fearing that he might be press-ganged by soldiers who had the right to take him away and force him to work on their projects, regardless of whether his wife was pregnant or not. Nevertheless, they dreamed of peace, a time when they and their child would be free from the threat of violence from soldiers, a time where they could eat together with their neighbors or sleep in their own home without having to leave. They wanted to be free from being constantly taxed to pay for an emperor's army and never seeing any benefits for themselves.
They dreamed of peace because they needed the world to change. And did things ever change? One day they were two homeless people in a big city looking for a place to stay. And the next minute they were three. The change from being husband to father and being wife to mother that would forever shift how they felt about life. And they placed their baby in a feed trough for cows. Nevertheless, they felt great joy when they saw that tiny baby. They laughed when he yawned. They counted his fingers and toes, maybe, amazed to see this tiny one take his first breaths of life, maybe cry at the shock of being outside of that cozy, warm womb. They felt joy at new possibilities, at new opportunities, at the wonder of new birth. But this story wasn't just about a young family.
It was about the outcasts, the downtrodden, the people who didn't have good educations or great job skills, who weren't seen as doing essential work. The shepherds, living lonely lives cut off from their families as they spent months at a time up on the hills doing their jobs, protecting sheep from wolves and lions, and getting precious little recognition for their efforts, even though sheep provided food, clothing, milk, and cheese for the community. The shepherds were the smelly ones, down on their luck, taking the worst job that society had, and being treated like outcasts because they couldn't come to church regularly like they were supposed to. Nevertheless, they found they were loved not just by each other, but by the wonderful mystery that spoke to them one night of awe, of not being afraid, of peace and hope and joy. They found the love the angels told them about, and it transformed those shepherds into love tellers, hope bearers, and story carriers. This story of love, peace, hope, and joy has seen our families and communities through plagues and wars, crusades, and revolutions. This story has inspired us to collectively work for justice, fair taxes, free education, accessible health care, and even provincial parks. It has put kindness as an important part of what it means to be a good citizen. No more do we judge people based on how good they are with a sword or with words, but with how they change the world for the better. Martin Luther never knew his calm and steady response to the bubonic plague would inspire us 500 years later. And Christians taking care of the sick never knew that they would inspire a new movement towards universal health care. Preachers talking about how all humans were loved equally by God never knew that they would help inspire a democratic system with a vote for everyone and equality under the law. Quakers protesting that all Christians were to be treated justly never knew that one day slavery would be ended. Methodist missionaries piloting those boats up the shorelines of Canada never knew they were building community. Nevertheless, they let this story inspire their faith and their actions. Just as I never knew how much better a color TV would be from black and white, or how there would be more channels than just two on TV, I didn't know how those times would change to now. And I don't know how these times we live in now will look 500 years from now. But this ancient story reminds us that we can and will see changes that will be an inspiration for years to come. God is with us in these times through these ancient stories of resilience and hope. We are not alone, and nevertheless, God's peace and joy and love will continue with us and generations to come, far into the future. Thanks be to God.